It's like stepping into another world, you know? You never expect to see a boat this size sitting out in the woods. It was hard to conceive that somebody would actually build this, much less expect to get it downhill. Applegate was this brilliant genius of a guy, full beard and kind of a jovial face.
He lived up here in the San Juans to kind of get away from the mainstream life.
Seeing the boat for the first time was like a wonderment. I mean, it's one of the 7 wonders of Orcas Island, right? It has to be. It's just crazy to imagine this one little guy building that.
It's the mystique of a boat on top of a hill. How did this get here?
Well, let's see. You can see I have a legacy of a boat here that my brother and my sister and I have inherited. And it is a unique lawn ornament of sorts, or in this case, a forest ornament.
High tech, eh?
Well, the first time I came here, App was up on the deck working on the boat, and I had no idea who he was, and he was a little short guy, you know. I looked up and he said, "Ahoy there." And I said, "Ahoy." And he says, "Come on board." We went into the galley and sat at the little table down there, and I was just curious about this man and this boat that he was building. I looked on the board, and there was several pretty complex equations written on the board. And then below it, it said bread, nuts, and peanut butter. And I thought, well, you got it all right there, you know, survival, mentally and physically.
I was just in awe of the boat and the project. I said, if you ever need a hand, let me know. And I gave him my phone number. The next day, App called me and said, yeah, I could use some help.
He had a way of engaging people where they wanted to come and work on the boat, and he had to depend on a lot of volunteer help to get done what he got done.
The Aproximada was designed almost entirely using mathematics without drawings. He did it with a hand calculator and reams of paper.
And so here's the equation for the transverse curve, and this explains the symbology. As you can see, this is kind of fun.
You make a boat by putting little pieces of wood together for a long time. That's how he did it. For 30 years, he put little pieces together until he had a boat.
It was all made out of island fir that App had cut and milled by the Bond brothers. You have this frame that looks like a whale. I think it was something like 13 feet wide and 80 feet long. Everything seemed built. As you walked up to it, you thought, this boat's just going to sail off this mountain. The inside of the boat looks like a hobbit's house. It's very narrow, a little bit cramped. There's 3 bulkheads that separate the boat and make it feel chopped up. Even though it's quite a large boat, it still feels cramped. The beauty of it when I first started working with App was it was like a hobbit home, but App was there. So it was like a hobbit home with the hobbit there, which was really just beautiful. When people would hear that I was working with a guy that was building a ship on the side of the mountain, they would say almost invariably, is he waiting for the flood? But the people that got it were the ones that had the imagination, and they're the ones that said, can I help?
If the wind is blowing, it's wonderful because the trees are moving and making lots of sounds. I like to go up on the deck and just imagine what it would be like to be at sea and looking up at the sky. The boat became the soapbox, the platform, the stage, and it drew people to him.
It was just people kind of randomly showing up. He didn't really leave the property. And I did feel like in some ways he built the boat as a roadside attraction. He had his own world with the metric system and no daylight savings time and like off-grid, and everything was by his rules. And he just wanted everyone to come live in that world with him.
I suppose the thing works two ways. You could travel and meet people, or you could stay in one place and wait for people to go by. And in this case, my dad did the latter.
And that was pretty much how it happened with almost everybody. Someone showed up and they were invited aboard. They would slither down into one of the hatches, into the galley, and that's where he'd make his coffee and he'd start telling you about Cuba.
This is Radio Havana, Cuba.
But I tuned in on Radio Havana, Cuba more and more regularly. And eventually I subscribed to Grandma. And over the course of a few years, I decided that, well, Cuba had a lot to offer. By the time I began building the Aproximada, I had it in mind to sail from this country to Cuba.
When he got the boat off the mountain, his plan was to sail around the world, ending up in Cuba. And then he would live out the rest of his years in Cuba.
It is the fundamental policy of the United States to dominate the world, one way or another. And those bastard Cubans, they aren't doing what we want them to do.
App and Rivka are family. Going to Mount Pickett for me was like stepping into App's world. I think part of why I love them so much is because they haven't ever outgrown their idealism. And I'm still kind of holding on to this funky ass lifestyle. And I really love it and I believe in what I'm doing, but it's lonely. And so finding these older people who like never gave that up, it made me feel really good. He wasn't finding anything inspiring in what they always call the dominant culture. So he created his own culture.
We did what I called shared solitude. I really went there not to be in relationship with Applegate. I went there because he was living a lifestyle, and it was the lifestyle that I also wanted to live and needed support to do. It's difficult to do alone. Those years being with App, working on the boat, living on the land, was just very comfortable.
The boat was the inspiration for App that gave a way for artisans and craftsmen on the island here to become part of this Applegate family. And the Applegate family was always in flux.
When someone would show up, they would just be kind of brought in as if they had always been there. App was very, very kind and very, very accommodating to people. He would bring them aboard, give them coffee, and tell them stories. And that happened over and over and over again.
Much of the discussion that we had over the years was how the hell to get the boat down to the water.
I don't know if he really meant it, but he entertained ideas of like helicopters, dirigibles. It was kind of hard sometimes to tell what was a joke and what was a real theory or possibility.
Everybody came up with the idea of using a helicopter. Due to the weight of the vessel, it would have been 2 helicopters, but with 2 helicopters, you've got them trying to pull away from each other in order not to have it all collapse into disaster.
It was pretty clear right away that it had to come down via the road and be skidded down the hill.
And the idea was to hook a caterpillar to the front and another one to the back. The front would be pulling and the back one would be brakes. And in that way, control the slide down the hillside.
You got to remember, when we were doing all this boat was almost pristine. Now everything's rotting away. You could come up here and you could feel that this thing was ready to go in the water. We really thought we were going to make it down the hill. We were excited about being in the water.
For the past 10 years, let's say, I have thought about the fact that there was a strong likelihood that it would never get down the hill. Like dying at sea, it isn't anything you can worry about. If the vessel gets down the hill, well, that's splendid. If it doesn't get down the hill, well, then we do something else.
That was the bright part of App, was he always had the wind at his back and it was moving him forward. And he never really came out and said it, we're not gonna make it. But we just knew, because his persona and his spirit just kind of shrunk. It's like riding the wave and just having the wave just go, shh. You know, that's the way we all felt.
People always want to ask about the reality of getting it off the mountain and if it would sail, but I didn't care about any of that. I was inspired by like how passionate he was to work on it every day and not really caring what anyone thought or that he was making money off it or whether it did ever float.
Working with him was just great fun. That's why we all did it. It didn't matter whether the boat was going to ever launch or not. I don't think we ever believed it would. But if it did, we wanted to be there and be part of it. Being there and being part of it was enough in itself.
He always had this saying, he would say, it'll be done in 2 years. I think he said that from probably within a week of starting the boat. And I think App maybe never even fully believed it would go around the world. It's just that imagination that I'm just doing it because it's beautiful.
I always thought he would get it down and get it into the water. And that was kind of disappointing, just to see it sit and see it rot. He just didn't have the money to swing it to get it off the mountain.
It is piece by piece, just rotting away. And at some point, all you'll see will be the metal parts left, because the basic boat itself is not long for this world.
I don't feel bad about it rotting into the woods. It's an art installation. It's an incredible piece of artwork. It would have been nice to see it last even longer for more people to see it. But it's there, and it's beautiful, and it will be for a few more years.
The trip was not from launch on. The trip was the actual experience of working with App, watching how he materialized his dream and giving him what help we could.
I went up to visit one day, and I said, well, you know, what do you think if we raised a mast? And that raising the mast brought the biggest smile to his face, the idea that we would continue, regardless. Everybody knows, it's like we all know the secret. It's not going down the mountain. So we're just gonna put the mast up right here. And he just showed more excitement and enthusiasm than I'd seen in him in years. And that came, I think, from just that reality that, you know, we're all on the same page. It's just a beautiful thing.
At one point, this boat and all of us working on it were one. The boat knew it when we came here to work on it. The boat felt our presence. We certainly felt the boat's presence as it came alive.
It was magical. It was doing something that was outside anything I'd ever done with one of the most interesting people I'd ever met.
Aproximada feels stuck in time. I don't feel like it's going to stay there forever. It'll be a great adventure to see how it ends up.
I might not have been so enthusiastic about building another vessel and sailing off to Cuba if it weren't so damn cold here.